everyone, my name is ZeBirdBrain and today we are talking about color palettes. So there's a lot of things to say about color palettes. It's not an easy subject, and I can't possibly cover everything in a 5-minute video. But I'll try my best to give you some working knowledge of this mysterious topic. And as you'll see later in the video, this week I will borrow Lackadaisy's assets and characters. Lackadaisy is a comic created by Tracy G. Butler. It is a lovely comic and I advise everybody to read it. I'll put some links in the description below. So now let's get started and learn about color palettes. So the way Harmony treats color is a bit unique. So there's multiple ways to deal with colors, because you can have a vector layer or a bitmap layer. So if you have a bitmap layer, then handling your colors is no different than any other software. You can go to your color view here and find the color that you need. But if you're working with vector, this is where it gets a little more complicated, because instead of having the RGB slider, you have a bunch of little squares with colors. So the way Harmony treats color is a bit like watercolor palettes. So you have your little box of color right here with the little room where you would get your color swatches, right? So this is the box containing all your colors, and inside your palette, if you go here, you have these swatches. So the swatches in Harmony, they work a bit like painting by color. So instead of being white, this is actually like color ID number 1, if we look at it in a coding way. If I put the ID 1 here, the 2 here, you see I'm starting to populate my palette just like I would in real life. But the beautiful thing with Harmony is that if I go here and I change this color, it will change it. So this is why it's important not to name these as like white or orange or whatever your color is for your character. Name it as ideas, but we're gonna touch base on that in a moment. So you have your palette, that is your things that hold all your colors together, and then you have the little individual swatches. Note that for the swatches, if you want to get a different way to see them, you can right click and simply click on swatch mode here. If you deactivate it, you get this view, and if you activate it, you get this view. And the beautiful thing with these palettes is that if I right click and I clone it, then Harmony will remember the ID of the colors. So if I go on this one and I change the colors, I tint them to something else, like this super quick. If I go here and I make it appear on top, it'll change these colors, alright, because they're linked together. It would not have worked if it was a duplicate. It's really just with clone, but this is something I've already talked about in another video. Alright, so that being said, let's jump in and actually create an actual color palette. And for this experiment, I have Mr. Frickle here. So of course, it's like a cooking show. I already have the final product, but we're gonna go together and recreate it from scratch. So before you get started, make sure you have at least a character sheet with your chosen colors. And then you need to create your color palette. To do this, head over to your color view right here. If you can't find it, press on the plus sign, and it will be in the list. And the color view is separated in 2 parts. You have the palettes and the swatches. So in the palette, you'll find the plus sign here. You can press on this button to create yourself a new color palette. And then all you have to do is name your palette in a smart way. About naming palettes, note that like everything, usually if you have many palettes, they will be stored in an alphabetical order. So it is smart to plan this ahead and have the palettes that you will use the most, like your main characters, named with a code that perhaps starts with a 0, so that they will always show on top of the list. This is typically how I name my palettes. So if it was for a main character like Frickle, I would write 00, so it always shows on top. And then MM, because he's part of the main cast of character, underscore code name. It's usually like 4 letters that it takes less place. Then underscore the version of his colors, because maybe he's gonna have a night palette, a sunset palette, and then 01, because you know, there's gonna be many versions, because we make mistakes in life, and that's okay. And the palette type, of course, it's colors, because we're not making pencil texture, so just leave it to color and it'll be fine. Then all you need to do is go to the swatch part and create your little swatches. Now, people have this superstitious thinking that apparently you should always delete the first default palette because it's gonna mess up your scene and everything will burn and you'll cry. But I've tested it and it's literally just a normal swatch named default with the color black. It's nothing else. So feel free to just keep it, rename it to something else, or if you're too scared and you're superstitious, you can just delete it by pressing on the minus button and creating a new one. And then you just need to create a bunch of them. So I'm gonna press on plus to have a bunch of colors. And you can always add or remove them later, so it's fine. And this would be for a texture. If you wanted to have a color as a texture, you could just like click and go get your files, but we're gonna see that later. It's not common, so whatever. So then you can go ahead and color pick your colors. To do this, simply click on the rectangle here to access the color picker. So to color pick, super easy. You just click and drag the eyedropper to the desired color. So click and drag to the desired color, and no matter where you are in your screen, it will color pick the right color. Amazing! So for naming, refrain from calling them by colors, like orange, because like I said, it's like painting per number, so these are color IDs. So instead of naming it orange, you should name it fur main. And you should also always specify whether it's a line or a fill, because if you write skin or main fur, people don't know if it's for the highlight of the fur, if it's for the line, the fills, who knows. So typically the naming used for this is L and F, standing for line and fills, but I've also seen I and P for ink and paint, so it really depends on where you work and where you are. The only thing I cannot stress enough is to make it one letter and to make it super clear. And to do that, just write, for example, F for fill, underscore for main, and then if I go in my reference and I zoom in, I'll see that he also has a color for the line of his fur. So I could go ahead here, click on the rectangle, write L, main fur. Lastly, you should always include the name of the character as a prefix to avoid any problems down the road with duplicates or trying to find your swatch, or if you want to refer it in scripting. It's really important to put a unique code in front of your color. So that would be, for example, FRCK for freckle underscore L underscore main fur. And it would do the same here. So that you're sure that if another character also have a color called F underscore for main, so if the two palettes are in the same scene, they will not like have problem with each other because all the swatches will be named in a unique fashion. If you're making a very small project just for yourself, you can totally omit this step. This is more for like bigger projects. And then you can just keep doing this for all your colors, which would eventually lead you to having your complete palette like that. So little things that people usually forget when they do character sheets and color palettes is typically the sole of the shoes, the inside of the mouth, and also the inside of clothing. So always be careful and have these available to your artist or to yourself when you plan your stuff ahead. Sometimes if you cannot see it, you can have it as small little swatches here that you can color pick. And after that, I mean, you should be done. You have your color palettes. If you want to create multiple versions of that palette, like I've shown you before, don't forget to right click and clone it so that they're still linked together. If you wanted to start from that palette and just rename them to something else, for another character that is similar to Freckle, for example, if you have like a twin brother or something, you could duplicate it instead. But don't forget to change the naming as well so that nothing interferes with each other. Alright, so I hope you had fun and I'll see you again next week. Bye bye!